Hello, everybody, and welcome back for another edition of Ukraine This Week with me, Don Arleth, bringing you the latest developments from the war in Ukraine. The G7 summit in Canada ended without any joint statement, without any more support from the United States, and without the expected meeting between President Zelenskyy and President Trump. The Kremlin again launched one of its deadliest strikes on Kyiv, killing 28 people and wounding over 130, just as Zelenskyy arrived at the G7. President Trump had already departed, citing urgent developments in the Middle East. As the world's focus shifts to the Israeli-Iranian conflict, Ukraine is left to fend for itself while Russia ramps up attacks, knowing that there will be no reaction from the West. Now let's watch this report about Ukraine over the past week.
At the G7 summit in Canada, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy arrived with a mission to push for a ceasefire and tougher sanctions.
We are ready for the peace negotiations, unconditional ceasefire. I think it's very important, but for this we need pressure. And of course I want to speak with Prime Minister today about sanctions, additional sanctions.
But hopes for a diplomatic breakthrough were dashed. US President Donald Trump left early. European leaders debated seizing only the interest, not the capital of Russia's frozen assets. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin signaled he's ready to meet Zelenskyy, but few in Ukraine believe it.
I think it is all a lie. Putin is not making any compromises and accepts any talks.
This is all just a screen to show that Putin can, wants and does something. But everything will remain the same.
This was a terrible week for Kyiv. On June 17th, one of the most lethal Russian attacks of the war flattened entire sections of residential buildings. 28 people were killed and 134 injured, most in Kyiv, where an entire building entrance collapsed. Some victims were burned alive in their beds. Behind each number in a death toll, a human story. In a moment that went viral across Ukraine, a father was filmed grieving over the news that his son had died inside the destroyed building. Nearby neighbors searched for anyone left under the rubble.
There were elderly and children. They had cuts on their hands. A little boy had his neck cut. It was all horrible. I do not know how much Russians want to torture us.
President Zelenskyy mourned the victims in person, calling the strike one of the most horrific to hit the capital since the start of the war. He said over 440 drones and 32 missiles were launched in a single night across Ukraine. In Odessa, a Russian drone strike on June 17th killed a 60-year-old woman and injured at least 17 others. On the 20th, one person was killed and at least 14 were injured as Russia intensified its attacks. Other strikes stretched from Dnipro to Kharkiv, Sumy and Kherson, injuring dozens. At least 10 people were killed in those regions this week, with dozens injured, including children and the elderly. Amid the grief, a moment of relief, another prisoner exchange took place this week under the Istanbul deal.
My love, this is not a dream. This is real. My love, this is real. I feel good.
And in silence, Ukraine received the remains of 1,245 more fallen soldiers as part of the Istanbul agreements. According to Ukrainian officials, this marks the final stage of a phased repatriation process that began earlier this month. In total, Kyiv says it has now recovered the bodies of over 6,000 soldiers from Russia. From summit stages to smoldering ruins, Ukraine continues to witness peace offers on paper and missiles in the sky. Ukraine's skies are under siege. In just the first 2 weeks of June, Russia launched more drones than all of last year, a strategy designed to overwhelm and deplete the country's air defenses. The latest Shahed drones, locally assembled in Russia, now come with heavier warheads, up to 90 kilograms, and smarter targeting systems, making them harder to shoot down.
The Russians use various types of missiles in this attack: cruise, ballistic and aeroballistic. There were also drones, Iranian Shahed drones, to complicate the work of our air defense.
On Tuesday, Kyiv was hit by the deadliest attack in months. Ballistic missiles and swarms of drones targeted the capital, tearing through homes, dormitories, and even part of a historic church that is older than Russia itself. Experts say Russia is using decoys, swarming tactics, and staggering launches to confuse defenders. The idea? To overwhelm Ukraine's limited number of Patriot and other anti-air missile systems. However, Ukrainians have no other option than to use any and all means of defense to protect Ukrainian cities. Often these are small units using large-caliber machine guns and anti-aircraft guns.
Russians are trying to press us down and launch more mass attacks. Maybe it's just a coincidence, but it feels like there are far more drones around now.
Ukraine currently has only 6 operational Patriot systems, not enough to cover all major cities. Some have to be rotated between regions, and as missile stock dwindle and new US aid remains uncertain, Kyiv faces increasing gaps in its air shield.
To unpack some of these stories and more, joining us now is Daria Kaleniuk, Executive Director at the Anti-Corruption Action Center. Hello, Daria, and thank you very much for joining us on Ukraine This Week.
Hello, it's good to be here.
Yes, now I want to start, I've got some questions for you concerning anti-corruption efforts and what have you, but I've got a lot of other things for you to touch upon as well. And I'd like to just start off with the G7 meeting that took place this week. Zelenskyy left the G7 without meeting Trump. There was no announcement of new weapons support from the United States. So what outcome, if anything, is there from the G7 summit for Ukraine?
Well, Ukraine was not sanctioned yet by Trump. It's already a good outcome. I'm joking, obviously, but unfortunately, G7 is not anymore a powerful player in a geopolitical game because of the weird position of Donald Trump and United States. So we understand that our partners, allies, other G6 countries are trying hard to have united communique following the G7 summit, but we understand that the position of President Trump is complicated, let's put it like that. So he expects for some sort of reasonable thinking from Vladimir Putin. He had a phone call with Vladimir Putin. And unfortunately, there is a quite strong bill in Congress about sanctioning Russia even more. However, President Trump has no leadership to impose those sanctions. So he's expecting for something. And clearly for Ukraine, it is important to sustain flow of military equipment from the United States. Some of that equipment is crucial for our air defense. We cannot replace it with other equipment, particularly for shooting down ballistic missiles. So we do hope that the US at least will approve sales of its equipment to Ukraine or to our partners which can provide it to Ukraine. But you see that situation with air raids is deteriorating in Ukraine. Russia is experimenting with the combined strikes. If they have started with a few dozens of Shaheeds about a year ago attacking our civilian cities, now they are throwing 300, 400 Shaheeds overnight, just targeting one city, the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. And they are sending it in a combined strike with cruise missile, ballistic missiles. So, and it's very horrifying. It's pure terrorism. What Putin is doing, he can't win Ukraine militarily on the battlefield. Therefore, he's trying to destroy our will to fight, and therefore he's targeting civilians. And you probably observed that the missile arrived to the multi-story building, and entire block of the building just collapsed, and there were more than 20 people under the rubble who were dead.
Yeah, horrible scenes coming out of the capital this week. Russia launched another devastating drone attack again during the G7. Let's talk about air defense for a minute. How can Ukraine strengthen the air defense at this point? I understand that the world's focus has shifted now to the Middle East once again. This is the second time that this major shift in focus is taking place. But looking at the adaptations that are being made by the Russians, that they're flying these drones, first of all, in bigger numbers, second of all, at higher altitudes, and third of all, with bigger warheads attached to them, and different guidance systems, potentially. So where does Ukraine go at this point? We've seen the mobile units that surround the capital and that defend the skies using heavy machine guns. They're highly mobile, and they're small units that do that and protect the skies. But it seems to me that there needs to be a different approach now to start taking out these drones. What are your thoughts?
That is correct. We are fighting very agile war, and both sides are learning fast and adapting fast. So basically, Russians learned that we can fight down the Shahed drones with mobile units, and they have adapted these drones. Now they are much more higher, and we can't reach them with the mobile units. There have to be different approaches. Clearly, there are solutions, but in a wartime, the speed is important. And from the moment of innovation to the moment of scaling up the production, sometimes weeks, sometimes months, sometimes, well, we can't afford years, but sometimes years can pass. And we know that our production sector, in the defense sector, is trying to cope. Also, in order to scale up production of the innovations, important is to have really good government and strong governance and strong institutions. This is what professionally I'm focusing on in Ukraine, and this is where I think we still have our potential. But yet, as I have started, we cannot shoot down ballistics. And if Russia is firing their ballistic missiles, only Patriot missile can stop the ballistics. And the Patriot missiles are very expensive, and they are not produced everywhere. It's a technology owned by the Americans. And it is critical for us that this technology, these missiles, which are able to shoot down ballistics, is being provided to Ukraine. The strategy of Russians is just to exhaust our air defense, particularly expensive air defense with Shahed drones. And they are firing these drones to understand what are the weaknesses in our air defense, where there are air defense placed. They're also firing simultaneously hundreds of targets so that our fighter jets, including new F-16 fighter jets, are not able to shoot down all these targets. So, and then the most devastating effects are coming from the missiles, which we are not able to stop. Sometimes Shahed drones also themselves are imposing significant damage. If a drone hits a multi-story building and the inhabitants are close to the windows, unlikely they will survive. But if they are, let's say, at least hiding in a corridor or in the bathroom, there is high likelihood they can survive. If they go to the bomb shelter, the likelihood is bigger. But if there is a ballistic missile, it just, entire block of the apartment building falls apart. So there is no way to escape.
Right. So with ballistics, not many options on the table. Well, I picked up on something that you said, dealing with the institutions, making sure that you have good governance. And in the situation that we're currently seeing unfold in Ukraine, part of that is deploying this innovation that we've been seeing coming out of the private sector. And I would imagine that shifting resources, government resources, from the budget and properly allocating them to these private firms or these startups or these very innovative engineers that are coming up with new solutions is something that is absolutely critical right now. Maybe you could tell us about some of the bottlenecks or some of the issues that Ukraine is currently having with doing this in the most maximum efficient way.
We are facing the challenges which every NATO country will face and is already facing, but underestimates because you don't feel the actual war. And during the wartime, the peacetime rules don't apply, especially for procurements of military equipment and for scaling up military innovative solutions. The speed is the most important, the cost is the most important. And for that, clearly new rules have to be written, and there has to be proper adaptation to the fast track procurement and fast track innovation in the defense sector. Obviously, there has to be also a proper system of checks and balances, so that if there is a solution, the best solution is being procured. And also, it's a huge budget. All military budgets are exposed to corruption, and in wartime, a lot of secrecy is in place for the good reason. But there have to be systems built to ensure that you can mitigate these risks of corruption and misuse of money. We are now pushing our government to get it done. Some important steps were already done. In a peacetime, there would be huge victories. In the wartime, it is not enough. We have to be more effective. We have to make sure that every single Ukrainian hryvnia which is being spent for our defense is spent the most effective way, so that on time our air defense has all the equipment and our soldiers on the front line have better technological solutions than our enemy.
We've seen some certain corruption scandals stemming out of the Ministry of Defense, and obviously this is only natural at a time during war. I mean, listen, I'm American. My country's been at war for most of the past 25 years before we pulled out of Afghanistan, and we spent tons of money there, and there was a lot of money stolen. So anybody that would say that that Americans are immune to this is simply simply not truthful. I'd like to ask you about Pete Hegseth said something the other day in the Congress when he was in a hearing. He was asked by Senator Graham whether there were plans to transfer about $6 billion worth of heavy equipment, ammunition, and weapons to Ukraine that's sitting there ready to go. And it was approved by the Biden administration, and he replied no. We also remember President Zelenskyy saying that a significant sum of money never reached Ukraine because it disappeared somewhere on the other side of the Atlantic. Have you guys got a notion of exactly how much of the assistance to Ukraine never actually made it to Ukraine?
All military assistance coming from the United States of America comes to Ukraine in the form of equipment. Money is not being sent to Ukraine in terms of the military assistance from the United States. It's the first thing to know. Second thing to know, it is the United States which calculates the cost of the equipment which is being sent to Ukraine. So what was announced in terms of money for military assistance is the calculated cost of the equipment by American side. And no one can say precisely what is the exact amount of those costs. And I can't tell you myself as well. I think it's about 70 billion for these 3 years. America is still number first in terms of countries which are providing military assistance to Ukraine and which used to provide military assistance to Ukraine. Now we are receiving the final packages of military equipment still approved and packed by Biden administration. And we are using still American assistance in American equipment, which was decided by previous administration. This administration didn't decide new packages. They are operating and they are executing the budget and the decisions which were done by the previous leadership. And it's very sad that some of this equipment which had to go to Ukraine went apparently to the Middle East. And you're talking that there is attention now to Middle East again. Yet Iran is part of this war in Ukraine because all these Shahed drones, which are terrorizing Ukrainians literally every night, they have been designed by Iran, and Iran has supplied this technology to Russia. Russia has upgraded this technology, obviously shared it with Iranians. Now Iranians can use better their drones, and they are using them. There is exchange between Iran and Russia also in designing missiles, including ballistic missiles. So Iran is learning very fast in this war, and it seems that dictatorships and authoritarian regimes can learn faster how to build more bombs and guns and more innovative bombs and guns rather than democracies. So democracies have to wake up, and specifically the people, societies which got used to live in peace, have to understand that this peace is under huge risk. It is challenged that I personally believe that we are already in the World War III, and it's just the different version of the war. But the conventional warfare on the front line, on the battlefield, can reach out to Europe, and it can happen much faster than we even think. I think that Putin is feeling now emboldened, empowered. His relationships with the US are now better than ever before. So it's the moment to jump in and seize the opportunity, especially also when the world attention is on a bit different conflict in the Middle East. So I think that countries which are close to Russia, Eastern NATO eastern borders, Baltic countries, Poland, etc., must be really extremely worried.
Yeah, and I hope I speak for others, but I'm holding my breath, hoping that there will be a major policy shift in the United States, as there very well should be. I also don't understand quite this approach, but what also strikes me in this conflict with Iran, between Iran and Israel, is that Russia has proven itself to be actually a completely unreliable ally to Iran. Iran has reached out to Russia for some assistance the other way, because now Iran's in big trouble. And Russia is unable or unwilling or both to be a good ally to Iran. Looking at this, do you think that maybe there could be a split in this close cooperation that we've seen over the last few years between Russia and Iran?
These relationships between dictators, they are complicated for us to understand. You can never predict what will happen. On surface, it might look that Russia is not supporting Iran, but there might be some, underwater, non-seen, obviously, cooperation which might be happening. So you never know that. Putin took from Iran a lot of support, and likely he will try to pay back. Probably he feels that he already paid back with providing technology and knowledge and know-how how to run the war. The most important relationships for Putin is actually with China. He needs Chinese money. He needs also Chinese technology, and he was extremely happy when Xi, Chinese leader, came to the it's war parade on May 9 to Moscow. So I think that Russian president cares the most about these relationships. So he can keep running the war against Ukraine without Iran. He cannot keep running the war without China.
Certainly, which seems like a bridge that somehow needs to be connected with the United States. Which brings me to Andriy Yermak and the latest piece in Politico that was published. Of course, this is President Zelensky's top aide, and Politico writes about criticism in Washington for his abrasive style, lack of understanding U.S. politics, and strained relations with both the Trump and Biden administrations. What is the perception of Andriy Yermak? I've heard from many Ukrainians that he is indeed the most powerful person and the biggest decision maker in Ukraine. Other people say he's the second most important. What is your perception of Andriy Yermak, and does this style of, or maybe this kind of lack of understanding of how the politics work in Washington, does it pose a threat for Ukraine in this current stage of the war?
It does pose a threat. Andriy Yermak is indeed number 2 person in Ukraine after President Zelenskyy, because he monopolized power and influence over the government of Ukraine. He is directly deciding who is going to be the minister, the deputy minister in different ministries. This allowed him to take initiative in international relations. He replaced with himself Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Foreign Affairs, as well as the Minister of Defense and Ministry of Defense. He also replaced with his other aide, Oleg Tatarov, extremely notorious guy, the policy on justice in Ukraine. So that is harmful because, partially because of corruption, but partially because of ineffectiveness and inefficiency. One person, even if it is Napoleon, cannot hold and manage so many tasks simultaneously. And that obviously very negatively impacts our relationships with the United States. The United States is a strategic partner, critical for Ukraine, for our security, and there must be a proper policy of the of Ukraine in cooperating with the United States. There have to be the combination of people, of organizations who have to talk to United States, different leaders. But Andriy Yermak thinks that he is the only one who has to do that, and who has power to do that, and who has capacities to do that. But honestly, he's not the best expert in Ukraine-American relationships. That had negative impact because both now Republicans and Democrats are quite tired of Andriy Yermak. So he can afford himself the same style of communication in the United States as he has in Ukraine with Ukrainian ministers and other agencies and subordinates, but no one is subordinate to Andriy Yermak in the United States. So that's, I think, the negative aspect of monopolization and concentration of power. And this is, in Ukraine, nobody likes Yermak. I belong one of the most vivid critics of this person, and I think that it harms, the monopolization of power harms Ukraine, particularly in building strong, effective institutions where we can scale up our innovations and productions. With such level of governance and micromanagements, we just cannot scale up our solutions fast.
So,
but
what
for
is
some reason President Zelenskyy trusts him, and that's the 100 million question why. I don't know why.
Okay. So what does Zelenskyy do next? I think you've said he's pretty much a liability at this point, more than he's a help. So does Zelenskyy replace him? They are political allies, and I guess last time I was back for the anniversary of the war in Kyiv, at the time they were talking about potentially a new party emerging with Yermak and Zelenskyy.
Yermak is not elected politician. He cannot be elected in Ukraine as he has zero credibility and trust. Zelenskyy is legitimate president of Ukraine. He has trust. He was elected. And for Yermak to maintain his power and monopoly, it is critical important so that Zelenskyy also stays in power, and that Zelenskyy believes that he is an irreplaceable manager. I don't think that Zelenskyy will get rid of Yermak. For some reason, they are extremely related to each other. For some reason, Zelenskyy thinks that Andriy Yermak is the best manager in the country, in the world probably, and only Andriy Yermak can deliver complicated solutions to him.
Okay, so likely stuck together.
Yeah, we have both positive qualities of Zelensky. Like he's a perfect communicator in international arena. He can talk to people, deal with people. But in terms of being the manager, unfortunately, Zelensky is not the best manager.
I'd like to ask you one more question before we go, because we're almost out of time. And this is the whole scenario that's been going down with former President Petro Poroshenko. Is this Zelensky trying to eliminate his political competition? Because I think Poroshenko is the only credible challenger to Zelensky in the event that there will be the next presidential elections, which Zelensky said he's interested to continue his presidency. Maybe
Poroshenko has zero chances to become president again. His support is very limited, and many people just remember he was not delivering proper reforms during his presidency. So there is high trust inside Ukraine to various military leaders, to volunteers, and I think that the new political elite in Ukraine will come from this sector. It is critical so that President Zelensky is sticking to democracy and is not using and abusing various law enforcement agencies in order to intimidate his political opponents. I think in terms of Poroshenko, it's just personal. Since there was this competition during the last election, Zelensky doesn't like Poroshenko on the personal level. But in terms of the future of Ukraine, I think the more risky for Ukrainian future is when our non-reformed law enforcement agencies are investigating and attacking some Ukrainian top military, which have trust from society and potentially in future electorally can really challenge President Zelensky.
Yes, Daria, I 100% agree with you. I've been saying this for years, that the next leadership and the true transformation of Ukraine is going to come from the heroes and the leaders on the front lines. I really do believe that, and I'm very happy that I heard that come from you. Daria Kaleniuk, Executive Director at the Anti-Corruption Action Center, thank you so much for joining us this week. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you for your interest. Thank you.
And that's all the time we have on Ukraine This Week. Join us again next week for all the latest news and developments from the war in Ukraine. Thanks for watching, and see you then. Goodbye.